Hey, I'm Paul Sinenko and you're watching the Learn DGLux5 channel. This week we're talking about drag and drop functionality, which is very easy to set up, as you can see in a second, and will give you an awesome, powerful tool to create great, responsive and intuitive applications for your clients. Let's get behind the controls and see how it's done. Alright, we're here at the controls, and the first thing that we're going to do is to look at the drag drop functionality, where to find it and how to configure this. So to set it up, you need two things. You need an object that is draggable and the target, which is droppable. So for our purpose, let's just go with a very simple route. We're going to use a circle here. That's going to be our draggable object. And let's use a square. And let's make it a different color just for aesthetics. There, that's going to be our target. So obviously if we simply switch to preview, neither of these are draggable or droppable. So let's look at how to make them. So let's do the circle first. Under advanced properties, I'm going to search for drag. So here, I'm going to enable draggable, right? And I need to give it a drag group ID. So this is anything I want, any string. It will have to match with a target so that DGLux would know where you are allowed to drop this draggable object. So let's use this as object 1. Like so, and that's enough for now. All right, so this is all you need for basic setup. So we're going to move to our target, and here we're going to search for drop. So drop group now has to match our drag group. So object 1, and we're going to enable this. Okay, so now let's see what happens. Switch to preview. Now I'm able to grab it, and when I move it over the target, you see that my cursor changes to show that I'm allowed to do this, to drop it. Now nothing happens when I drop it yet. I have not defined any functionality. For now, it just simply allows me to drag one thing and allows me to drop it over another thing, over a target. So this will be the step 1 in setting up your drag drop. Next, we're going to take a look at actually passing a piece of data. So to do that, we're going to first supply that data. So we're going to go back to our draggable object. I'm going to search for drag again, and there's a field called drag data. So you can bind anything you want to it. So I'm going to go to the data flow, and let's start with just a simple string. Hello world, because why not? And we're going to bind that to drag data. Right. Here, so now we need to capture that. So we're going to switch to target, and here the drag data is empty. So let's see, how can we grab it? So what is supposed to happen is when I grab this object and drop it over that object, my drag data is supposed to appear somewhere else, right? But it doesn't right now because it's not set up. So now it's time to set up the target. So I'm going to go to the data flow. Now notice on the target, I'm not using drag data because this is only used for the draggable object. Now on the target where you drop it, you capture that data differently. So I'm going to go to a data flow, and I'm going to find a mouse event block. Now this part is a little bit non-intuitive, so you just have to remember it. So you need a mouse event block, like so. Just drop it. It has to exist, well, ideally on the data flow of your target. But the important part is that you bind on the drag drop event of your target to the input of the mouse event, like so. So this will give you basically everything you need. So it will give you an event, right? Drag drop. It will give you your drag data when you drop, and it also tell you, for whatever purpose, if you happen to need it, the name of the object that you dropped, the system name, of course, not your label. Okay, so let's go ahead and change this string. So instead of hello world, let's do hello again. All right, so and let's keep watching this mouse event block. So as I drag, notice that drag data still says here hello world. As I drop, now I get message hello again, and my event has fired. So basically this gives me a trigger to do something and gives me data to do something with. All right, so let's now look at an actual application of this. All right, so for that we're going to use something different. So we're going to use, I'm going to add a form element text input. All right, and let me give it a few styling properties so we can tell it apart from the background. Like so. And I'm going to make it draggable. I'm going to keep the same drag group. Object 1. All right, and my drag data would actually be my value, my text that I type in. Right, and for now I'm going to remove all the text, so just reset it and put a placeholder as type something. Make it a little bit bigger. Okay, on the target here, I'm going to make something else happen. I'm going to have a table here. And I'll set up one column, say timestamp, TS, and value. It's going to be an empty table. Okay, I'm going to use add row block from our table operations that we covered in one of the episodes. This is going to be the target, 2 columns. So first column will be TS, the other would be value. Now in my case, I'm going to use system time to get my current timestamp, which is right here. Right, my value will come from the drag data. Okay, and for the invoke, I'm going to use drag drop event. However, I'm going to add a slight delay to make absolutely sure that the add row block is invoked after the drag data is available. So if I simply did, okay, it's pinned. So if I simply did this, there's a chance that this event will fire at the same time or even slightly before this drag data property is already populated. So I'm going to use a delay block, and event will go into input, output go to invoke. And delay, I'm going to need a very tiny delay, just 0.2 seconds, like this. And since I already had an event there, of course it fired and gave me my first value, which is fine. Okay, so now what this is supposed to do, if I did it correctly, is I can type something in, drag it into my target, drop it, and it will get added to my table. So let's give it a shot. So we'll keep an eye on the table here. We're in preview mode, and let's try this. Hey, drag this, drop it, and something did not work. So let's debug this real quick. So we see that drag data did make it over. Okay, and the event did not fire. So what I'm going to do actually is maybe use the original input into my delay instead of output, like so. Now let's try this again. Let's do hey there. There we go. Okay, that gave us the proper timing event chain where event fires early after the value is available. All right, so basically we set up a very simple use case of adding something to your table using drag drop functionality. Okay, now let's take a look at a slightly different usage of this feature, which is to add things to the list. So I'm just going to copy this symbol name, go to my repeater, which is somewhere over here. As a matter of fact, let me add stroke around it so we can tell it apart from the background. There we go. So that's going to be my symbol. All right, it's going to be driven by the label. And let me tweak the sizing just a bit. So yeah, I'm going to make this flex. Actually, I'll just do 100%. Now it's going to grow here, but that's fine. There. And give it a bit of spacing so we can tell it apart. So this is the repeater. Gap. Like so. Okay, I'm happy with this. So this is going to be a list of a source list, right? And I'm going to duplicate this to be my destination list. However, so let me label this source destination. So source is fed from this list node. Now destination is going to be fed from a writable table because I'm going to need to be able to add things to it. So this is the table. I want it to be exactly the same format as, well, actually no, I don't. All I need is maybe label and path. Label. And path. So these two parameters I'm going to basically keep. All right, and that's going to be my data. And I don't need this. And you can probably tell where I'm going with this. So what I want to do is I want to set up the case where I can drag item from this list into this list and it would get populated. So first thing I need to do is set up my destination as a target. So let's make this droppable. Right? The group, let's call it node list. Right. And while I'm here, I'm just going to go ahead and set up the full chain of action here. So remember the mouse event block. So I'm going to go ahead and use it here. We're going to use on drag drop to initiate. All right. We're going to use add row block. And this is going to be the table we're adding the row 2. Oh, too many. And label and path are the two fields that we care about. They are going to come from a drag data which we don't have yet. So we can grab them to bind them. So we'll do it after the initial drop. So we're going to use delay block like we did last time. Again, use a tiny delay of 0.2 seconds. I'm going to use the same drag drop for the delay. Actually, let me disconnect that. I'll bind it later because I don't want it to fire in the first drop. Okay, so we'll keep it at that for now. Now I'm going to go into my line list items here. And I'm going to edit a symbol. So let's do edit one instance. Bigger than I want it to be there. It doesn't matter. We're not going to touch the sizing or the visual. We're just going to go to drag, make it draggable. We're going to give it a drag group of node list, I think. Is that what we called it? And drag data. Now that part is important. Drag data would be map to table. If you recall, this is a block that gives a whole row that corresponds to individual line item in the repeater that you're editing. And that's going to be my drag data. Okay, so it's going to pass, when I drop, it's going to pass the whole row of the table that drives this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and accept. Like that. And I'm going to go ahead and drop one on to get my drag data. So dropped. Remember, I did not bind the add row invoke trigger yet because I didn't want anything added. I just want a chance to see my drag data, which is right here. You see drag data table, so that passed the whole table. Unfortunately, this is not a table type property, so I can't click it to open that table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring out a table. I'm going to label it destination table, just so we know what it is. And I'm going to bind, first let me pin this. I'm going to bind table here. So now, since this is a table type property, I can actually click it. This is the row that came in. There we go. So I'm going to, of course, use the name as the label and path as path. And one last item that I need to do, well, first of all, now I can bind my trigger. There we go. And lastly, because in my destination, my column is named label, not name, I need to rebind this to my label. Okay, so let's take a look at what happened now. So now we can grab something, drop it, and look at that. It gets added to the list. So what's actually happening is when I grab this and I drop it on the target, a data of a row that supports that particular instance of a symbol is passed to my destination along with a trigger that something was just dropped on it. And on that trigger, I execute add row block that takes values from that row that came in and adds it to the table that drives my destination. So as you can see, I'm not actually moving visual physical object from place to place. I'm simply moving a piece of data and an event, and that's enough to create something at the destination. Now the visual aspect of the dragging, by default, it'll just use a semi-transparent version of whatever object you were dragging. However, you do have an option to specify a separate symbol of what it looks like when you're dragging. So you can actually create a symbol that looks like a draggable item, and as you drag, instead of just showing a copy of the same object, it will show you your symbol. And then when you drop, of course, it'll go away. So you can customize what it looks like when you're dragging. Okay, so we're gonna take maybe look at one more application of this. So application will be similar, however, it's also going to involve positioning. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to add another group. This will also be a repeater. However, this one will not be vertical layout repeater. It's going to be an absolute positioning repeater. Right. And I'm going to create a new symbol. For now, I'll just do it right inside here. So we'll make it maybe 10 by 10. And give it some fill and rounded corners. And so it just looks like a dot. I'm not gonna make it any more elaborate than this. Well, maybe I'll make it slightly bigger. Let's do 20 by 20. I'm gonna convert this to a symbol. Called map dot. Right, and done. So I will also make this a destination table. So let's make this droppable. Sorry, destination group. So drop group will be same node list, droppable, and in the data flow, I'm going to use mouse event block. So input will be on drag drop. Right. One thing you'll notice is as you drop, you don't only get the drag data, you also get the positioning of where it has been dropped. And that's going to be important for us because in this case, we're going to position the item where you dropped it. So I'm going to just copy this table because our table here will be similar. Sorry, notice when the advanced properties are open, switching, operating DGLux becomes a bit slower because it takes some time to query and render properties. So I always like to switch back to the default set of properties. It makes environment work a bit faster. Anyway, so there you go. So we're just going to add X and Y column, like so. And as a matter of fact, most of this functionality will work quite well for us. So let me go ahead and just copy all of it. And I'm just going to delete everything here, paste it here. All right, so we just need to modify this table again. X, Y, and add X and Y to this block. And of course, use the X and Y from our mouse event. And finally, we're going to use that table now to drive the repeater. Right? We're going to do map dot as our item renderer. Right? And we need to add some properties to it. So we're going to add, well, any one property will do. So we'll do label. This is just so we can display a tooltip on a mouse over. And we're going to, of course, drop a map to table block, which will give us the whole row. Right, which doesn't have X and Y yet because remember this is a copy of the other table that never had this initially. That's quite all right in this case. I'm going to delete this row when we're done. So I'm going to basically bind the X and Y, so offset, but I'm going to offset for the center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, subtract here. I'm going to subtract, so I'm going to take X, I'm going to subtract half of the width. So, and this is going to be the horizontal offset. I'm going to duplicate this for vertical offset. So it's going to be Y. And this is going to be our vertical size divided by 2. And that's going to be the vertical offset. There, so that the center of the circle will land exactly at the mouse cursor. Okay, so I'm okay with this. I'm going to go ahead and delete this row because this was not added naturally. This is a copy of the other table. Of course, we didn't take time here to set up functionality to remove items because that's not part of the lesson. All right, so there's just one thing left to do. Remember, we created a label property, which is not bound yet. And because not a single property is bound to the repeater table, the map to table block inside the symbol will also not return your row. It's very important to have at least one property be driven by the table. So I'm going to bind the label. There we go. So that made everything work, and on mouse over, of course, it gives me the name. So now I can drop things, right? And they get automatically placed in an absolute layout. So it's very similar to the destination list, except here we're also utilizing the positioning as well to add things to the list. So that will conclude our exploration of the drag and drop feature for this lesson. As you can see, it's not terribly difficult to set up, and there's not much you have to remember. The only part that's not very intuitive is, of course, using the mouse event block to get your drag data, basically to set up your destination for your drop. Okay, that's it. Let's get back to the studio. Hey, welcome back. Well, this wasn't too difficult like I promised, and now you have a cool new tool in your toolbox to make your application awesome for your customers. I'm Paul Sinenko. Until next week, go build something.